Hello, everyone, and welcome to At Barrons. I'm Andy Serwer, and welcome to our guest, Greg Brown, CEO of Motorola Solutions. Greg, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
So, Motorola Solutions Motorola hasn't made phones in a very long time. Some people still associate the name with phones.
Indeed.
What exactly are you doing right now? Talk to us about the company.
So the nucleus of the company is designed around the anchor tenant is emergency communications radio systems, mission critical radio systems. So think police, fire, ambulance, military, NYPD, Chicago PD, LA, and the like. The private networks, the emergency, always reliable, always on, in spite of a natural disaster, without cellular congestion. These networks are provisioned, installed, and dedicated by Motorola Solutions, along with the radios. Some call them walkie-talkies.
You don't like to say
Well,
walkie-talkies.
people relate to it, but it's a much more sophisticated product. That's why I avoid it. But that's the majority of what we do, and we are the worldwide leader there are about 13,000 private networks, not cellular, not AT&T, not Verizon, not T-Mobile, but private, owned by the customer. And we put the infrastructure in, we encrypt it, we secure it, we monetize the services, and we refresh the devices, i.e. radios, and we're the leader in that business worldwide. Additionally, we do 911 software primarily in North America. There's about 6,000 911 centers, so you think 911 call handling, CAD dispatch, records and evidentiary management. We have a software portfolio that does basically emergency workflow in 911 command centers. We have software that's in almost 2/3 of the 911 centers in North America. And the third leg of the stool, we do video security and access control. So think either smart cities with video security, think physical security or private security, where you will have cameras positioned to secure your enterprise. We do that. We do license plate recognition. So the new Motorola, if you will, i.e. Motorola Solutions, is grounded in public safety and physical security, and we connect people in need with those who can help. That's what we do.
You have been CEO, I think, since what, 2007?
2001 of 08, this is my 17th year.
Right. We've talked previously about your trials and tribulations and
Scar tissue.
Right, exactly. Going through the business at that point, which was very challenging. And I'm wondering, the company's been incredibly successful. We'll talk more about that. Is this a reflection of a growing concern and need to provide security? What accounts for the company's incredible growth over those 17 years?
I think it's a combination of things. If you go back and rewind the tape, the foundation that was laid for growth was because we knew what not to do. Let's not do cell phones. Let's not do commoditized cellular infrastructure. Let's not do a deteriorating physical cable TV set-top box. And let's focus on all things, these mission-critical emergency communications networks that we knew, most others didn't, that had an incredible durability and longevity for literally decades and decades, that would provide a stickiness, a durability of earnings and cash flow, and could be the flywheel to re-engineer a new Motorola Solutions around public safety and security. So the reason the company has been successful is we made the right bet on which technology to keep and which ones to divest.
And it's not necessarily the most sexy sounding business,
Not at all.
particularly back then. And also, some might say that the opportunity was not so big. How big of a market is it? Now you guys have a market cap of what, 64 billion, something like that. But how big is the TAM in terms of sales?
So the market cap of the firm, as you said, is 64 billion. The enterprise value is just under 70 billion. And the addressable market for all the things that we do is 66 billion. That's a 2024 addressable market number. And Andy, very importantly, it's zeroing out China. So Motorola was one of the very first companies in China, and we were one of the very first companies to leave China over a decade ago, before it was more in vogue and people had a greater appreciation of what was happening around intellectual property theft and trade secrets. So the street has Motorola doing revenue just under $11 billion in 2024 with a $66 billion addressable market, so there's tremendous room to run. The other reason I think the company has prospered is we have a new leadership team, Motorolans that got promoted up from within, and in the last, I would say, decade, we have been able to make a core competency of the company acquisitions. We didn't do a lot of them historically. Motorola was a conglomerate. We were cutting, we weren't adding. Well, once we cut to the powerful muscular nucleus of the company, now we've added both organic development and inorganic in a very accretive way and in a way that's made the company stronger and allows us to prosper in markets like 911 software, video security, physical access control, and markets and adjacencies to public safety that we weren't in a decade ago. Great people, great acquisitions, security more critical than ever, and by the way, not just domestically, but internationally as well, with the conflict in Ukraine and Gaza and migration and other considerations going on.
I want to ask about that international piece, Greg. You mentioned China and not being there, but are you competing against Chinese firms, say, in Europe, in other markets besides the United States, and how's that playing out?
It's tough. The primary competitor is a company called Hytera. It's a radio competitor, and Chinese, and they compete with us everywhere. But we are in our 7th year of pursuing and closing out a long-standing litigation. It's coming home to roost in 2024 and 2025. But outside of the U.S., yes, because in less developed countries, where rules are more cloudy and ambiguous, they still compete, but in the case of Hytera, they're doing it with our technology. We also compete with the Chinese in video security, Hikvision and Dahua, outside of the U.S. But Andy, there's one other very important point. The U.S. in the National Defense Authorization Act has looked at these Chinese companies, and there are 5. Huawei, ZTE, Hytera, Hikvision, and Dahua. They are banned from the U.S. federal government, and the U.S. federal government has banned any use of federal grant money to buy those products. I think other Western-like democracies, whether it's the UK, Australia, of course Canada and others, are very reticent and concerned about these Chinese actors and their relationship with the Communist Party, and at all considering them either in emergency communications or video for public safety or critical infrastructure.
This may be a funny question to ask you, Greg, but in a way, isn't the success of your business somewhat a reflection of troubles in the world? You mentioned Ukraine and Gaza, but also just increased security concerns in the United States and globally. Also climate change affecting weather, which means natural disasters. So is the bad news good news for you guys?
The answer is yes. In part, that's part of why we're growing. But the other half of that loaf, Andy, is we're the best at what we do. And I don't mean that to be arrogant, but we've been 70 years doing mission-critical communications. We have a superior product portfolio. We have market leadership. We have spectral efficiency. By the way, there was the thesis 10 years ago was this boring, non-sexy Motorola walkie-talkie company is a melting ice cube. And the future will be smartphones, whether Android or iOS, and you'll put a push-to-talk button. Everybody will use them, and those ugly bricks will be in a history museum someday. The opposite is true.
Why is that?
Because these networks, these power management, the design of these networks and this equipment is not a cellular network, it is a private network. Meaning what? Meaning it's dedicated to nothing but emergency services. Meaning what? Meaning that if a bomb went off if the cellular infrastructure goes down in New York City, your Verizon phone gonna work or AT&T? You already know the answer. In our networks, they are designed where they actually can work without infrastructure. You could eliminate the infrastructure and still have peer-to-peer communications, which is why these devices are larger, because they have power management, design technology, and repeater engineering so that they can maintain emergency communications without an infrastructure. So yes, bad news can lead to good news for our company. But that's also kind of masks the quality, the criticality, and what we do is a need to have, not a nice to have, and that has elevated to the top of the food chain. Lastly, 4G, 5G, the networks that were purported to potentially damage or impair our business, has helped it. Why? Because first responders have a brand new radio, which is LMR, a private land mobile radio network, and we put 4G or 5G on it, so you could do software programming over the air. You can have improved location management. And if you roam out of the coverage area as a police officer in Queens or Staten Island, that call can seamlessly stay picked up by roaming onto LTE. And it can provide video situational awareness. So LTE augments the performance of private radio communications, hence our rising tide.
What about problems where various police forces, fire, safety, EMS can't communicate with each other?
Yesterday's news, not true anymore.
Really?
There's a new standard, well, new. It's probably 15 or 20 years old now, P25.
Dating myself, maybe.
P25 is the interoperable standard where any radio will work with any infrastructure, and they'll be interoperable between infrastructure and radio, and they'll be interoperable interagency. So I would say that was a problem more in the 90s, maybe 25 years ago, but that problem has been eliminated in terms of seamless interoperability.
Are you in the business of video cameras for police and other agencies?
Yes, we're a second provider. We got into the business about 4 or 5 years ago. So we do body-worn cameras as a viable alternative to the dominant number one, who basically was in that market 8 or 10 years without a competitor. We are now an emerging competitor and a viable one. In addition, we're doing body-worn cameras for enterprise. So there's a high concern around retail smash and grab, retail service personnel being concerned about their safety, healthcare, nurses. So we are selling a lot of body-worn camera into the enterprise, which is newer to the market. Body-worn camera in public safety has been used for several years. Yeah. Being used in commercial enterprises is new. Lastly, we've had great success on public safety body-worn video internationally. Romania, Finland. So whether it's body-worn video, enterprise or public safety, dash cam video, if you're in a squad car, it could be license plate recognition video, where we are the market leader. Video is more and more and more critical. You have to ingest all these input points and sensor points. You have to be able to process it and store it in a 911 command center and extract critical information and maybe on occasion push it to a first responder to his or her radio. We have that full suite.
What metrics do you use to benchmark the business?
Well, number one, total shareholder return. Total shareholder
TSR.
TSR. TSR is our North Star. Now, I know it's an output, but we, management and the board, are maniacally focused on TSR in a healthy way. But it's not just TSR. It's TSR against the market and TSR against your peer group. So if the stock goes from A to B and we're all happy, I don't know if that's good or bad. Because if the market's growing faster, we're underperforming. If the peer group's growing faster, we're underperforming. Now, how do you get TSR? Superior product, great people, world-class intellectual property and patent portfolio, operational excellence, and revenue growth, margin expansion, cash flow expansion. My job, Andy, as CEO, is two things: capital allocation and people. That's it. Where do we spend the money? R&D, organically, inorganically, and which people lead this company and who's on the bench to lead it in the future.
I was going to ask you about capital allocation, Greg. What are the biggest opportunities for your business and your company, and where are you laying your bets?
Well, right now, the biggest opportunities are organic investment. So we're investing more in video. We're investing more in radio in the product areas. Andy, we're also investing more on the go-to-market distribution reach and the sales forces, direct and indirect, to sell that expanded product line. I am very proud of the fact that one of my favorite stats, Andy. We've done just under $16 billion of share repurchase over the course of Motorola Solutions at an aggregate price of just under 69, and the stock is in the high 380s today. And most companies get share repo wrong, and most companies get acquisitions wrong. 70 or 80% of the acquisitions in general don't meet the business case. So the other prioritization of capital is acquisitions. We've had a fantastic track record. We have a lot more work to do, but as I sit here with you today, investing in the firm organically and expanding our distribution, and we have a very attractive funnel of opportunities for acquisitions, but we have to make sure they make sense strategically, financially, it's accretive, operationally, it's culturally compatible, and we can execute.
You've been CEO since the financial crisis. That's been a while. Are you still engaged and want to stay in the seat?
Absolutely. I love what I do. This is the best company in the world. I get the NVIDIAs and the Apples and the Microsofts. I get that. I have great respect in $2 or $3 trillion companies. But it's not about necessarily size. It's about the value you've created and the value that you can in the future. I am very proud of everything we've done to date, but it doesn't matter. It's about the next year, 3, and 5. And I look at the environment, I look at the product portfolio, I look at the team, I look at the opportunity, the strategic decisions of where we play without China and where we're focused. And I'm as energized as I've ever been to continue to do this. It's a privilege and an honor.
And final question, Greg. We've talked about the company's success. I think the stock is up, over 1,200% over your tenure?
As of Friday, I think it was 1,249%.
But who's counting?
I don't know.
Versus, say, 400% plus for the S&P 500,
Exactly.
Your relative benchmark. We talked about the market cap. You do have a trailing PE of over 40, so make the case for us, for investors out there, why they should own the stock going forward.
Sure. Well, do you think, to an earlier point you made, do you think the world will be more safe going forward or less safe? Question 1. Question 2, we didn't talk about this, but in the Inflation Reduction Act, there's $350 billion that are available in multi-years for funding for technology refresh. This runs through 2026, many of these approved funding categories. We expect it to be extended beyond that. Number 3, you replace your smartphone every 2 or 3 years, maybe longer. Public safety radios typically are 7 to 8 years. We are in the early stages of a device refresh in North America, in Europe, and beyond. And by the way, that device refresh captures both the emergency LMR characteristics that are second to none, and they incorporate LTE, the new higher speed broadband. So the funding's available. The world continues to be a challenging place. You see what's happening at the border. You see what's happening in big city crime. Do we think video will play a more prominent role? All things video, body worn, dash cam, enterprise, public safety. And so the underlying growth drivers are as strong as ever. And then to the addressable market, if you're $10.5 billion and change against a $66 billion addressable market, I would suggest there's a lot of opportunity. Off the top of my head, those are some compelling reasons. But by the way, I want to make sure we're our own worst critic. We're not going to be complacent. We're staying continually focused on the customer and having the best talent in the firm execute to those needs in the market. I'm excited about our future.
Greg Brown, CEO of Motorola Solutions, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andy.
This is at Barrons. I'm Andy Serwer. We'll catch you next time.